One of the things that we like to talk about that can really make your life a lot happier and a lot more pleasant is trying to reduce anger in our own lives. Oh, come on, you're going to tell me everybody gets angry. Sure, well, I have a good reason for getting angry. Well, most of us realize that at some point, flaring tempers, righteous or self-righteous indignation, can really hurt a person and cause a lot of harm. You know, there's some psychologists that would like us to think that you have to vent your anger, let somebody know it's bothering you. And there are others which will tell you, if you can control your anger, it'll eventually go away. And if you don't retaliate in anger, you'll diffuse the situation. In fact, Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, said, a soft answer turns away wrath. How many of us can say, in the midst of being insulted, which I hope it never happens to you, but if it has, you can understand how serious the offense is that, somebody says, you're angry. Why don't you just calm down? Why you? And then the next thing you know, you're yelling back at them, they're yelling back at you. And it just escalates into a full-scale conflagration. Maybe that's why the Ramban, in fact, not maybe, I have no doubt about it, Nachmanides, wrote a letter to his son. And this is going back, over 1,000 years ago, close to 1,000 years ago. A son that he wanted to understand that anger has to be removed for you to have a happy, successful life. And many people read this letter on a weekly basis, in where he instructs his son to accustom himself to speak gently to all people at all times. He says, Tisna'id tamid, conduct yourself at all times. Be prepared. Don't let unnerving situations catch you by surprise. Like in driver training, they teach you how to avoid going into a skid by turning the wheel in a certain direction. Or members of an EMT, emergency services group, like let's say Hatzalah, they're prepared. They know what to do in an emergency situation. They don't wait till it happens to figure out, what should I do now? So if you know something's going to set you off, and you're going to get angry, or you don't know when that argument is going to flare up, and you prepare yourself, I'm not going to get angry, I'm not going to answer back. You prepare yourself mentally and emotionally. Just like a driver thinks about a possible skid, you'll be able to deal with difficult situations as they inevitably arise. I'm thinking about a gentleman that used to travel across the country on sales trips. And one day, as he was going on a trip, he told his wife, I didn't have a chance to speak to you before I left, but I just wanted to ask you, please, whatever you do, I usually leave one of my drawers locked, but I forgot to lock it this time. I'm just asking you, please don't look in that drawer. She's wondering, why would you instruct me to do that? I mean, we never had any secrets, and, they had a wonderful marriage. What secret document was in there? At any rate, he left, and of course, whose curiosity could be contained? I'm not saying she was right for doing it. Like, somebody once said his wife thinks that, that he worries too much, or that he's a little too curious. She said, in fact, she felt that his wife thinks that he's nosy. How did he know? Because he looked in her diary. Well, we got to keep our noses where they belong, but in a situation like this, she really felt she had no other choice. After all, it couldn't be anything bad. Anyway, she opens up the drawer, and to her amazing surprise, she finds a half a dozen eggs and stacks of $100 bills. And she can't figure out what this is. When the husband comes back, he says, I apologize for asking you not to look in the drawer. I'm sure that, your curiosity was contained. She said, well, as a matter of fact, I did look. He said, oh, okay. What was it? Well, I can't figure it out. What was it that you've got all these hundreds of dollar bills, a fortune of money, and half a dozen eggs? Could you please tell me what this is all about? Now, you're probably wondering, what is this rabbi talking to you about? Okay, here's what's going on. He said to her, well, to tell you the truth, every time I would get angry, I would take an egg and I would put it in the drawer. She said, there are only 6 eggs in the drawer. In the 20 years that we're married, you only got angry at me 6 times? He said, no, I would wait till I got a dozen, and then I'd put $1 in the drawer, so I'd have $1 a dozen. And he had hundreds and hundreds of $100 bills there. Which means that over the course of that 20-year marriage, he only got angered 6 times. And in his mind, it was 6 times too many. How would it be if we all kind of penalized ourselves every time we got angry? And we said, you know, if I don't get angry, that's money in the bank. If I do get angry, it's money withdrawn. Our dear friend, Rabbi Jonathan Rietti, likes to give a beautiful analogy to this, which is, let's say a person gets angry, and the next thing he knows, he's got money which was deposited in a bank. They deposit, let's say, $1 million, right? And he gets angry, and there's a withdrawal. And he doesn't get angry, and there's a deposit. So let's say that his wife says, I told you to take out the garbage and you didn't do it, or something happens and you know, he knows that he was not at fault, and he just doesn't answer back. He doesn't get angry, and he just goes along with everything smoothly. Calls up the bank, and they say, oh, yes, sir. We just deposited another $500,000 in your account. Oh, that's great. And then the next day, he responds in an angry manner, and he calls up and say, we just had to take out $500,000 from your account. Don't you think we'd all be a little more careful about it? Now, you may think that's silly, but the truth is, it's more than money in our bank account. It's an eternal account. When we control our anger, and we're going to talk about that, the steps that we can do to manage our anger and to eventually uproot it. And there's no trick to not getting angry when there's nothing to get angry about, right? You're just living, you know, sitting on a bench in a beautiful forest looking at the ocean out there, and there's nothing to get angry about. When there's something to get angry about, that's when we have to control it. I can tell you, what the Ramban tells us, and I would urge every one of you, get hold of it. They have it in Hebrew, English, and languages, you know, in every different corner of the world. It's called the Igeres Ramban. Get hold of it. That can be a major step toward our relationships between husbands and wives, between mothers and their children, between fathers and their children, between friends and relatives, by controlling our anger. So let's take that first step. And that, my friends, will be a way that we can help reduce the sinas chinam, the baseless hatred that we have for one another. And that will help rebuild the base of Mikdash, speedily and in our day. This is Peretz Eichler, here to Brute, grow for greatness.